We are recording this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast live from Industry 4.0 Industrial Training in Mequon, Wisconsin, where employers from all over the state of Wisconsin, all over the Midwest, are here learning about advanced manufacturing and Industry 4.0 technology. That is why I am so excited to introduce our guest today. My name is Matt Kirkner. I am your host for the Tech Ed Podcast. And today we are joined by Don Korfhage. He's the founder and president of iGear, where he leads a team that has been providing connected manufacturing software products for more than 3 decades. Now, at the Tech Ed Podcast, we are all about Industry 4.0. We are all about connected systems. And I first became interested in Don's company as I saw clients and partners using their product called Squeaks. Now, I grew up in the manufacturing world, and the world that I grew up in was a world of visual management and message boards that summarized key performance indicators. These are the staples of lean manufacturing. But historically, we rely on things like signs and labels and whiteboards and printouts to share information with our employees on our manufacturing floor. When Don says, as he does, that Squeaks uses technology to bring these solutions into the 21st century, he is exactly right. If you are an industrial employer, prepare to be amazed. If you're an educator, know that many like you are already teaching iGear and Squeaks technology because it is where the future of manufacturing is going. Welcome to the Tech Ed Podcast, where we visit with leaders who are shaping, innovating, and disrupting technical education. People who are not afraid to think differently, not afraid to try something new, all with the goal of securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. You were inspired, Don, to develop Squeaks by watching your son play golf. I think this is just an absolutely fascinating story that you shared with me. It's a great story that'll help our audience see the bigger picture of how smart technology and data analytics are transforming every single aspect of our lives. Tell that story to your audience, to our audience.
Well, thank you again, Matt. I also want to thank Kent Powell of Amatrol for introducing us. And that introduction was spot on. Yes, about 4 years ago, I was watching my son, a high school golfer, working on his golf swing at the driving range. And for those who know golf, you understand the TrackMan technology, but it's a technology that captures key data associated with the golf swing, like the spin of the ball, the launch angle, the club speed. And while he's doing this, he's got his phone behind him, and the phone is capturing a live video stream of what's going on, and he's sharing that in real time with his coach, who was in Nashville, about 3 hours away. And without saying a word, they're sharing video files, live data, and reviewing multimedia rich information and collaborating and making real-time adjustments to his swing to improve his performance. At that moment, I thought, gosh, we got all this technology, robotics and smart machines and sensors. And, from a communication and collaboration perspective, much like you introduced, Matt, we're still printing out paper and working with Morse code stack lights, while my son is working with mobile technology, rich video files and data from a smart TrackMan device, conveying that and collaborating 3 hours away in real time and making adjustments. And I thought, there's an opportunity.
I think it's just a really, really good example of how, in some ways, the world of technology had, for many manufacturers, gotten ahead of the world of manufacturing, and now manufacturing is trying to figure out how we can catch up with the rest of the world, which is an interesting place to be. I want to connect that story about golf to the world of manufacturing. But before we do, there's some members of our audience that may not be intimately familiar with the more outdated methods of data analysis and management in manufacturing. So can you tell us, before this era of connected systems, of Industry 4.0, of IIoT, how did manufacturers go about gathering data and sharing it with their team members?
As an example, common in manufacturing are these visual management boards you talked about that a team might huddle around before a shift, or in a plant manager meeting. And these huddle boards or these visual management boards, they're common to have the data in different places, different silos. They grab that data, they organize it in spreadsheets and Power BI and PDF files. Then they print it out, then they laminate it, then they walk it out to the board. And then by the time they put it on the board for review, it's outdated. And it's a very burdensome process. There's a lot of time wasted. And it's like reviewing, the stats of a game after the game. There's not much you can do when you're looking at information that's owed, as opposed to in the moment where you can make adjustments and improve the outcome during the shift or during production. Another example of what manufacturing is doing today, it's pretty common. A machine goes from automatic to manual state, or a continuous mode to a non-continuous mode, or there's a quality problem and there's a pull cord or a push button that calls for a quality manager. Those are very, very limited in the kind of information. They're a button you press, or a fault and a stack light goes on, or a light in an HMI system or an and-on board. And the content is almost communicated in a Morse code like fashion, as opposed to rich multimedia.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Don. You think about, boy, if I had $5 for every 5 minutes I spent in front of a huddle board, I'd be retired by now. And if I had $5 for every time I responded to an on light, I'd be retired 5 years ago. And you're right, a lot of times in manufacturing, certainly today and for sure in the past, we spend time looking into the rearview mirror. And really, it's all about now, how are we evolving as manufacturers? And some are further ahead than others. But as we look to the present for those that have already adopted Industry 4.0 technologies, and as we look to the future for those that are working on it, can you describe what does a manufacturing floor of the future or the present in Industry 4.0 look like? How are smart sensors and smart devices and data analytics software changing day-to-day operations?
Well, time is of the essence in manufacturing. At the end of the day, we only have so much time. And if you had $5 for the time you spent, but the net of it is downtime's consequential when you're producing product that has, a vehicle with a margin of $5,000-$6,000 and you're producing one per minute. There's no money made when there's gaps in the line. There's the net of it is time is money. We got pressures to get more done with less. We have an environment where labor is tough and people are spread thin. So the factory of the future, the factory of today, says when the smart sensor or the smart machine detects a problem or there's a gap in performance, we need to get that information to the tablet or to the phone, to the watch on the person, wherever they are. It's critical that the information be directed to the people responsible for that problem. So the factory of the future, as we're spread more thin, people are going to be more mobile. The information, much like it does in your everyday life, you don't go and wait to the evening news or the morning newspaper. You get the information pushed to you as you follow certain social media, Twitter feeds or whatever. You want the news directed to you that matters most to you. So I think the factory of the future has to acknowledge people are spread thin. They're covering a greater area. They're going to be more mobile. And, that visibility of what's important now has to be first. Most importantly, though, I think, what we focused on with Squeaks and our collaboration with the customer cited is communication that you see today in everyday life is kind of like open loop. It's not closed loop. The factory of the future, can't assume somebody's taking care of that quality call. It's got to know. So we got to have a closed loop form of communication where there's an acknowledgement, a got it. If not tended to, this thing, if you will, this concern escalates. There's workflows and escalation. If a torque problem associated with a seat on a car is not tended to, and that product gets out there and the consumer, it's consequential. So we have got to know that alert, if you will, was acted on. So, built into the factory of the future has got to be more closed loop communication where we know for certain that nothing slips through the cracks.
So let's talk a little bit about that closed loop and some of the technology that you and your team have devised and innovated in order to create that closed loop within manufacturing. At iGear, you developed a technology that's called Squeaks. It helps gather, analyze, and display data across an entire manufacturing plant. Tell our audience how this all works.
Well, as the saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's what led us to calling it Squeaks. Like a tweet, a message, an alert, we coined the phrase a squeak instead of a tweet. But the net of it is it started, Matt, as a messaging platform. So an alert, a quality concern, a machine fault arises. How do we push that out to the right people and bring visibility and drive action? So it started really as a messaging platform, a set of features much like Twitter. But when the machine drops out of automatic or there's a gap in performance, the squeak is going to the right team. The call for assistance is generated. And, we, in efforts to make sure you're not overloaded and bombarded with too much information, the product built into it, the messaging platform, ways to personalize so you could tune in or follow, much like you do with news in everyday life. With Industry 4.0, Matt, and all of the smart sensors and all the smart machines, you can almost argue that we have too much information or there's a potential for an overwhelming amount of information. So we have to arm the factory employees of the future to personalize based on their roles and responsibility, the information they're responsible for. It's not about volume. It's about helping the employees succeed by giving them helpful information. And then as that information goes out, as I mentioned earlier, we got to clarify ownership. Who is responding to that? And give, if you will, the requester, the sender of the squeak or the alert, feedback that somebody got it. And then we track that. So we date, time stamp every, if you will, event such that we drive accountability and ownership from got it to complete. So, the features of messaging were where we started. Recently we incorporated more the digital transformation of the huddle board, the visual management board, where people huddle around a board, especially with COVID recently, and that was kind of unexpected. But as it turns out, teamwork needs to take place and collaboration everywhere. We can't limit that to being near a board for bringing the experts, just like the example of my son and his coach 3 hours away. You've got to bring people in to the conversation with regards to problem solving. So the visual management board, where you have all these KPIs and activities on a board and you collaborate about what we can do. Today, for the most part, they're Excel or PDFs or analytic printouts from like Power BI. But with a digital platform, we can bring in web pages. We can bring in video feeds. We can bring in video files. So the sources of information grow. And we, much like the gentleman mentioned again prior, which was a great little walkthrough, there's these silos. We got to get rid of those silos. Those data silos have to be, if you will, organized, aggregated, much like Apple News might be on your phone, where you aggregate the news that matters to you in one consolidated place so you can be more efficient. So, for us, the visual management boards, the features today, it's about this connected worker, getting people the information they need, getting them connected with each other wherever they are, and the information that's important to them and helpful.
Let's talk about this connected worker a little bit. All of this technological innovation, Don, means the experience of a person working in manufacturing looks much, much different than it used to. And it's going to look much different in the future than it does now. You've used the term connected worker to describe this next gen workforce. What does the term connected worker mean?
It's got two layers at least, if not more. But the simple layer that most people relate to is technologically speaking. How do we, if you will, are connected just by the technologies? We got connected houses, connected cars. We're connected to each other by way of apps that keep our teams together, and our mobile devices, our phones and watches. But I got to tell you, our company has done a lot with the Toyota type companies of the world. And Toyota, when we talk about connected, to me, it's more than just technology. It's about people feeling part of the organization, a greater sense of purpose. How are you connected, regardless of your job, to the goals of the company from the individual on the front line all the way up to the CEO? There's a common set of KPIs, a common set of, if you will, organizational goals, and built into what we're doing, primarily because of the companies we work with. When we talk about connected, we're talking about how do we engage and empower and connect people organizationally, as well as technologically.
So these individuals, these connected workers, I love the fact that you talk about them being part of something bigger, them being part of an overall organization with an overall strategy. So it's not just the individual workforce or worker, rather, it's really the workforce as a whole. What is the difference in your mind between the connected worker and the connected workforce?
Well, it's culture. At the end of the day, Matt, when we talk about workforce, how do we create a culture where everybody's connected, everybody's aligned to the goals of the company? Don't get me wrong. I'm real careful in your earlier questions because I don't in any way want to dismiss the proven methodologies that many of our customers have. Many in manufacturing already understand the importance of engaging employees and getting team members working together to solve problems. They embrace the huddle board. They embrace the idea that there's key performance indicators, sub key performance indicators, activities that we're going to work on together. So when we talk about that connected workforce, it's a culture. It's a culture more than it is a technology. If you don't embrace those things, the technology's DOA. So to me, the connected workforce, much like the floor management boards or the visual management boards, they're a staple, when it comes to manufacturing at companies like Toyota. The connected worker, I don't know, maybe it's just a way of saying, we're providing them the tools they're already familiar with, the mobile devices and the tablets that allow them to be mobile. But at the end of the day, we're trying to facilitate better decision-making, quicker decision-making, help that worker succeed and have a greater sense of purpose.
So in as much as we're talking about how do we facilitate the success of the entire workforce and a group of people, in many ways, Industry 4.0 technology, does it not, allows us to individualize data and aggregate it to a specific worker for a specific purpose. Why do you think that it's important for us to take this sea of data and be able to focus it on the performance of a specific individual or a specific role within an organization?
The net of it is when we look at Industry 4.0 and smart machines and smart sensors, the goal is still to save time and eliminate burden. At the end of the day, the goal is not to take all of this information. And again, there's just a deluge, a volume of information, almost exponential, the growth of information in manufacturing. The key is to make it helpful, meaningful. And to do that, you got to provide a way for individuals to filter or tune in, focus on things that are important to them now. Otherwise, they're just going to be distracted with more noise. So when we look at the communication platform for Industry 4.0, for the connected worker to be effective and make faster, better decisions, we got to personalize. We got to give them control of the wheel and give them the ability to personalize the information that they receive.
So faster and better decisions, who wouldn't want to be able to do that? A connected workforce, a connected worker, obviously important things for us to figure out. All this stuff is really, really fascinating. Don, your technology is fascinating. One of the things I think you might struggle with, or we might struggle with, or our listeners might struggle with is how do we take all these really, really cool ideas and these really cool concepts and this amazing technology and actually put it to work in a manufacturing plant? Do you have an example of a manufacturer who is right now using your technology for continuous improvement, for connected workforce, for connected manufacturing that you can share with us?
Sure. Squeaks as a technology is running in about 300 or 400 plants right now. We've had a solid customer base to start with. We have a Toyota supplier as an example that did an extensive study for a month and looked at a production line with Squeaks versus one without. And this particular Toyota supplier focused on one metric, the mean time for response. So you mentioned earlier, Matt, andon. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the andon term. I'm sure you've heard it, but at the end of the day, an andon is nothing more than an event that could be caused by a machine going out of automatic mode, or it could be from a quality pull cord or a call for a team leader. That's an andon. That's an event, if you will, that warrants a response. So when we talk about mean time for response, this particular supplier to Toyota captured the mean time for response prior to Squeaks was 130 seconds. And then after Squeaks was installed on mobile devices and boards, the mean time for a response to a given event dropped from 130 seconds to 80 seconds. So about half. In an environment where time is of the essence, cutting that response time when that machine went from automatic to a faulted state. Now, I'm not saying we solved the problem in 80 seconds, but the person responsible for that quality call, that machine fault, took action and responded, was cut in half. And that happens 9,000 times a day at this particular company. But they were able to take that response time from 130 seconds to 80 seconds. So that's an example of more the messaging platform, if you will, messaging features. When you talk about the board, this idea of these visual management boards, frankly, man, it's burdensome. There's a lot of non-value added tasks. People are actually spending time, very sharp people, analysts, engineers, that are taking information from different sources, putting it in spreadsheets and PDFs and printing those out, laminating them, walking them to the board, if you will. When the meeting's held and there's data recorded, then they're taking that information back and entering it into the file. And there was a metals company that we work with that did a study, and they found that with Squeaks, they eliminated 2 hours of non-value add time per board, per shift. So when we talk about the time and people have limited resources, if we can save time and allow people to focus on innovation and problem solving instead of printing and laminating and walking sheets of paper to a board, and then if we can make those edits directly on a board where the file is synchronized and updated automatically, then these people were able to shift time from non-value added work to value added work. Those are just a couple examples of the messaging capability and the board I thought I'd cite and share.
And I think some really good examples for anybody in manufacturing, when you could take your response time from 130 seconds down to 80 seconds, as you suggest. Time is money. That's that much less downtime. That is that much more product you're shipping to customers. And we talk ad infinitum in manufacturing about the importance of turning non-value added time into value added time. So a couple of great examples. Don, as we've chatted today, you've mentioned some pretty big companies. If I'm a large company and I've got $1 billion software budget or a huge CapEx budget, and I've got the ability to put these technologies to work, that's one thing. Our nation is full of small to mid-sized businesses, companies that don't have that kind of budget to implement Industry 4.0 technology. We do live in a world of an exponential economy. Products are doubling in price performance every 12 to 18 months. But even given that world that we're living in, is this technology affordable to a $10 million, $50 million company, $2 million company, or is it just for the big companies?
It's available to the small to medium companies. And I think that's what's probably most exciting about this. And any of us that have bought a TV for our home have come to realize the price of that 65-inch TV has dropped from a pretty sizable amount. Now you can go out and pick out 65-inch TV to put it out on your line and have a production meeting around. That 65-inch T is $500. But a mobile device that allows you to get push notifications and see dashboards and metrics, they're $100. They're not expensive. These mobile devices, these tablets, these TVs, they're coming down in price every day. And even the interactive TV, if you look at, you want to have a TV and have a huddle meetings and actually write on it, a 65-inch interactive board is $2,000. So, these are a third, a fourth the price they were 3-4 years ago when we created. It just seems like, to your Moore's Law comment, I mean, the price of technology, specifically these communication technologies, because they're used everywhere, because they're used in the mass. Again, a mobile device that you could get for $100 is cheaper than a 3-station stack light. And they're capable of communicating a lot more video and rich content. So the cost of servers, the cost of PCs is making this affordable more and so every day. So the Squeaks software we're talking about that can drive the board and push notifications and share, gaps in performance and alerts for a 10-user, 2-board, if you will, visual management board. It's not real expensive technology. It's $2,000, the software. So an all-in to start your digital journey, is 4.0 is maybe $10,000, and you can get a lot of technology. So as a small company to a medium-sized manufacturer, this, I believe, is in reach.
So when you think about technology that's literally going to transform, and already is transforming, the world of manufacturing, and it's going to be a world of haves and have nots. Either we're going to be on board or we are not going to be on board as manufacturers. The insurance policy of being on board, $10,000, certainly not an extensive premium for a small to mid-sized business to get on the Industry 4.0 train. Certainly at that type of a price point, Don, you're working with a lot of small to mid-sized companies. You've given us some advice already. If I'm a small to mid-sized business, given the number of small to mid-sized companies that you work with, and I'm starting my Industry 4.0 journey, what is Don Korfhage's advice for that company?
It's almost essential, even if you're small to medium, you got to recruit the best talent. When you bring people in to interview and you bring in customers that you want to get their business, I think they see that. If they see you're somewhat dated in how you communicate with your employees and information, I think it sends the wrong signal. So, I think it's a basic ante, regardless of size. And if you need to recruit good people, which we all do, to me, having tools that these young folks coming into manufacturing can relate to. They don't relate to paper. They don't relate to two-way radio, walkie-talkies. They're used to mobile devices, and that's what they expect when they come to work. So, to me, it's make a small bet. Start small. Start a pilot. Pick a line. Pick a few metrics. Pick, a few employees. Hand out a few phones, and put in some software that allows you to leverage Industry 4.0 sensors and smart machines and a handful of metrics, and make a small bet and start your journey. So pick a metric or two, make people aware of it, get them engaged, and put in some technology that is more modern, if you will, and start the journey small.
It's interesting what small to mid-sized business isn't having tremendous trouble now finding skilled talent. And I think your characterization of an Industry 4.0 company, even if it's at the outset of its journey, having technology available that the students are going to recognize, that they'll be familiar with, that they'll be excited about working with, is just a really good example of how certainly we can use Industry 4.0 as a continuous improvement tool. We need to start thinking about it as a recruiting tool as well. So just a great point that you made there, Don. I think one of the things that's really important in terms of an Industry 4.0 journey is making sure that our team members are adopting the technology, comfortable with the technology, the folks that are already with us, that are going to be with us through this journey. How are individuals in smart manufacturing facilities and those that are working on becoming them and aspiring to be them, adapting to this new technology? And are they having a hard time picking it up?
Connected's the norm. We're using these technologies in everyday life. If you're hiring the young folks, they expect it. And frankly, even the middle-aged to older workers, these are technologies they're comfortable with. This is not a daunting task. Frankly, they're more comfortable with these type of communication and collaboration platforms than they are Morse code stack lights and two-way radios. And we're finding that in many ways, what we're trying to do is essentially what we're doing in everyday life, but putting that manufacturing, industrial, mission critical component where we have the closed loop communication, where we have messages not just going out, but acted on. So in many ways, a lot of it is already what they're familiar with. We're just adding those things that incorporate closed loop workflows, escalation rules, so that things don't fall through the crack and there's that ownership and accountability.
That ownership and accountability, so very important with our existing employees. We also talk about industrial employers needing to take ownership and accountability of their future workforce, right? Of working with whether it's a technical college, a middle school, a high school. If you're an industrial employer, how do you go about reaching the worker of the next generation, students who are in middle school or high school today, who grew up in this world of connected technology? How do we reach out to them and get connected with them?
We do a lot of work with manufacturing. And about 3 years ago, Paul Perkins and Ken Powell, Paul's the president of Amatrol, brainstormed with us about that topic. And you won't find anyone more passionate about the worker of the future and preparing the vocational student to be successful in industry than Paul Perkins. And the Amatrols of the world that are bringing curriculum and smart factory to this young generation, folks that understand manufacturing and what manufacturing needs, preparing these people to walk in day one out of that, Gateway Technical College, in many ways ahead of what's going on. And a lot of times the educational community seems to lag industry, but not in this case. Amatrol and Gateway, they're ahead in many ways. And we as industry have to recognize that talent is out there, and with vocational schools and technical colleges bring those people into the workforce. They bring a lot of new ideas and innovation.
So technology in terms of reaching the students, respect in terms of connecting with employers and creating that partnership that you referenced. Paul Perkins, by the way, himself a previous guest on the Tech Ed podcast, one of our very earliest ones. So you and I share that mutual respect for Paul and all the things that he does for technical education, and Kent Powell as well, who's just been a tremendous partner of ours. We're going to close out with one final question, Don, and it's a question that we ask all of our guests on the Tech Ed podcast. And as much as our listeners include industrial employers, educators, and frankly, a lot of students, if you could give one piece of advice to a high school sophomore as that individual considered their future, what would you tell them?
Don't be afraid to fail. Fail forward, pursue your passion, but do it in a manner that, you don't hold back. Don't be afraid. Lord knows in my business, I've been an entrepreneur for 30 plus years. I have failed more than I've succeeded as far as quantities, but you stumble through it and you learn and you get back up, and don't be afraid to fail.
As long as those successes are bigger than the sum of all the failures, we're in really good shape. I'm going to count this episode of our Tech Ed podcast, Don, as a complete success. I really appreciate you taking some time with us, with our audience, talking about iGear, talking about Squeaks, talking about how you are being a significant part of transforming the future of work and the future of manufacturing. Thank you so much for joining us on the Tech Ed podcast.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Tech Ed podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe, leave a review, and if you liked this episode, share it with a friend. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so listen in next week.